What's up, beautiful people? Welcome back to the Made to Excel Fitness Podcast, a fitness podcast for you, by you. I'm your host, as always, Mark Torres, and in today's episode 21, is Zac Efron lying to you. The Q&A is back, and I'm doing a new thing called the Weekly Follow-Up. Let's talk about it all. What is up, everybody? Welcome back to the show. Welcome back to the Made to Excel Fitness Podcast. It is Monday, July 27th. This is the 21st episode, so I've got my LT jersey on. This was back in the day when jersey sizing made no sense. This is a medium, and it fits like a dress. But anyways, today's episode is all about the show Down to Earth with Zac Efron on Netflix. Not about the entire show, but a specific episode. And funny enough, in the last episode, one of the last topic in the Made to Excel Fitness University of Hard Knocks of Common Sense was about Zac Efron's dad bod. And of course, the episode comes out on Monday. The show always comes out on a Monday. And earlier on in that week, or in the week prior, I should say, that the episode came out, the whole thing came out about Zac Efron having a dad bod, and I was like, what is going on? Like, that's not a dad bod. This is weird. Am I living in the Matrix? And then, of course, Sunday night, it finally caught up. I don't know what happened. I don't know if the story got posted somewhere else where it got more eyeballs, or, just people started seeing it then and there. And then finally, people started saying, this is not right. This is not a dad bod. You're setting unreal expectations. You're glorifying a body that's unrealistic. And people have been posting different clips of Zac Efron himself talking about this. So I don't need to say much more about Zac Efron and his dad bod. I'll let him tell you that in his own words. Here's a clip of him on the Ellen DeGeneres show.
Hey, good job. It's a little bigger than me. That's too big. And don't try and get for guys. That's unrealistic. I'm telling you. Like I got very big and buff for that movie. But I don't want people to think that's the best way to be. Like, be your size. Like, don't.
Yeah.
It's not. Like, I don't want to glamorize this.
So after watching that, and I think I've seen that before, but after watching that again, kudos to Zac Efron for setting the record straight. He says this is not a body that anybody should strive for. It was terrible. It was terrible to do. It was terrible to be that way. And I wrote about that in an article. Same thing with Kumail Nanjiani. He got ripped for his role in his upcoming role in the Eternals, and he said, "This is really hard. Not many people are going to be able to do this. I'm getting paid. My training is being paid by the biggest studio in the world. I'm getting paid a lot of money to look this way. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have done it." So, not to say that you shouldn't strive to be the best person that you could possibly be, but those people are probably way out there in the distance, and you probably don't need to go that far. I know you don't need to go that far. I need to stop doing that. But anyways, so that kind of segues nicely into today's episode. Today's episode is all about the show Down to Earth with Zac Efron on Netflix. And it's about one episode in particular. So if you haven't seen the show and you intend on watching the show, now is your opportunity to pause this episode, go to Netflix, go to Down to Earth with Zac Efron, and watch episode 4, the Sardinia episode, because I'm going to talk about that episode pretty extensively. So if you do intend on going to watch that show, definitely this is your opportunity, because there will be spoilers. Not that this is something that could be spoiled. It's not a story-driven show, but you get the gist of it. So last warning, because here it comes. 3, 2, 1. So the whole premise behind Down to Earth with Zac Efron is all about sustainability in the earth, how to make more sustainable energy, more environmentally friendly ways of living, and making the earth as healthy as possible. And of course, it looks at the human aspect as well. How do we become more healthy as human beings? How do we increase the life expectancy? It's all about health stuff, right? So Netflix does a great job, because these are not topics that people would go out of their way to try to consume content on otherwise. So they put a megastar like Zac Efron as the microphone for this kind of topic, for this information, and he's obviously passionate about it, and he does a really great job. It's a really interesting show. I enjoy watching it. So kudos to Netflix for putting this out there and getting a lot of this information out there that people wouldn't know otherwise, especially from the environmental aspect of it. There's obviously a gap in education when it comes to stuff like that, right? A lot of the things that we do from the environmental aspect are very old in nature, and they're very damaging to the earth as we know it. So a lot of these concepts and a lot of these ideas that they talk about in the show are not widely known concepts, are not widely used concepts. So obviously there's a gap in education where not many people know this stuff. So having a microphone like Zac Efron to put that stuff out there is a fantastic idea, right? One of the most attractive dudes on the planet, one of the most famous people on the planet, and he's spewing good information into the world, right? That's fantastic. And from the human side of it, not that it's not necessary to say this information, but if Down to Earth with Zac Efron never existed, the show never came to air, from the human side of it, you watching this show right now, watching this podcast or listening to this podcast, wherever you consume this show, know 95% of the information that you already need to know about living a long, healthy life, right? Eat lots of fruits, eat lots of veggies, eat lean meats, lean proteins, eat healthy carbs, be physically active, live a low-stress life, sleep a lot, right? These are all things that you know. These are very fundamental, basic things that 99.99% of people know. And that's 95% of everything you need to know about being healthy. The other 5% is like nutrients, minerals, antioxidants, fiber, things of that nature. They get very, very specific, and they do touch on that in the show, which I love. But as a fitness person myself, I'm looking at a lot of that human stuff in a different light, in a different aspect. My mind is always on from the fitness aspect of it. So I'll be the first to say that I am not a scientist. I never will be a scientist. I'm not the smartest person on the planet. And surely there are people on this show that are much, much smarter than me. But I want to look at it from a different lens, from a practical lens, from a real life lens, and see if some of these things make sense. So, episode 4, Sardinia, Down to Earth with Zac Efron. So, the reason they go to Sardinia, it's a small town in Italy, is the fact that it is one of the blue zones that we have on this planet. Now, this is from USA Today. A blue zone is, Sardinia is one of the only 5 blue zones in the world identifying as having residents who often reach age 90 or older. The other 4 are in Okinawa, Japan, Nicoya, Costa Rica, Ikaria, Greece, and the Seventh-day Adventist community in Loma Linda, California. So, people in Sardinia live a long time, right? Sardinia, I think in the show they say that Sardinia has 10 times more centenarians, people that live to be 100, than the USA does per capita. Obviously, there's more people that live in the US than live in Sardinia, but they have 10 times more people that live to be 100 or older than the US population by capita, right? So, but the interesting thing is, and not that this means anything, but the average life expectancy in the U.S., I think this is for a U.S. male, as of 2017 is 78-ish years old, right? 78 point something. And the average life expectancy in Sardinia, as of 2017, was just under 80. It was like 79.7. So just about 2 years more life expectancy in Sardinia than it is in the U.S., right? So there's obviously a lot of people that are living to be very, very old. But on average, 2 years is a lot, right? On paper, it doesn't seem like a lot, but imagine having 2 extra years to live. That is a long time. So on paper, it doesn't seem like a lot, but it is, especially when you consider the average of everybody. Obviously, there's always going to be outliers, but the average of everybody is 2 years. That's a long time, right? Imagine getting 2 years taken away from your life. You're like, oh, I'd be missing out on a lot. So obviously, when you start to look at Sardinia, scientists are going to want to know what's going on there, right? How come these people in Sardinia live to be so old? And how can we take that information and apply it to other places, right? So obviously the first people that Zac Efron and his health guru friend Darren meet are 2 nutritional scientists, and they want to look at their food and what they eat. So the thing that these 2 scientists say is that most people in Sardinia have a low-protein diet made up of foods that you can mostly find in a garden in your backyard, right? So the Sardinian diet is similar to paleo in a way. So the kind of the idea behind paleo is it's also known as the caveman diet. So if you're a paleo person, you're eating things that typical cavemen would have been able to find, right? You can eat a piece of chicken because cavemen probably had chicken. Cavemen didn't have Twinkies, right? So Twinkies is not a part of a paleo diet. So Sardinian diet is very similar in that fashion. These are things that they can find in a backyard garden, and that's what they're consuming. But they do make an emphasis on low protein, high carbs, which at that point, Zach's mind gets blown, right? Because he says, this is the exact opposite of everything that I've been told for, at least the last 10 years of my life. So obviously Zac Efron is somebody who has been cast as somebody who is very fit, right? He's got a very impressive physique that people seek out, right? Baywatch being one of them. Baywatch, he was like insanely lean. So he's like, this is the exact opposite of everything that's everybody's ever told me, right? Everybody says high protein, high protein, high protein, no carbs. So he's like, he's mind blown in that moment. And then the nutritional scientist goes on to say that many people in Sardinia, they eat 50 grams of protein per day. And the health guru in the show, Darren, says that's crazy because some people in the United States in particular, they will eat 50 grams of protein in one sitting. So there's obviously a big disconnect between like a typical Western U.S. diet and the Sardinian diet, right? So at that moment, Zach's mind is being blown, and obviously a lot of people that watch the show, their minds are probably being blown as well because it's directly contradicting the things that they say, right? So the nutritional scientists are believing that one of the key factors to long life is a low protein, high carb diet. So then later on in the show, they meet some other guy, and he's got this big chart. And pretty much the big chart is a family tree. It goes back 450 years. And he says that in 450 years, you can trace most people's family tree to only having, 5 surnames, right? So in my mind in that moment, I was like, wait, are they incestuous? Like, they have the same last names? Like, is that the secret to long life, is like getting with your cousin? But I think what they meant by that was Sardinians are marrying Sardinians and having kids with Sardinian people. So it's a very tight-knit community, right? So the thing that they're trying to say with that is, they say it in the show, there's a possibility that Sardinians have a gene that makes them predisposed to longer life, right? So they do mention that in the show as well. And then they go to a cooking class. So in this cooking class, they make bread, they make pasta, and they're eating the pasta. And Zach's like, this is amazing. I'm eating carbs. And he says, for the last several years of my life, I've had little to no carbs. For Baywatch, I had 0 carbs for 6 months. He's like, you need this. It's just so good. You need this in your life to be healthy, right? So Zach is really pushing this high carb narrative now, and it's blowing his mind because it's exact opposite of what he did for a lot of his life. So they really want to emphasize low protein, high carb, low protein, high carb. Which is, it's insane. 6 months without carbs is crazy, right? So the keto industry is like bawling their eyes out at this moment, right? Because they're like very high protein, very low carb, and the Sardinian diet's very much so the opposite. And then later on in the show, they meet this adorable old man. He's in his 80s, I think, late 80s, about to be 90, or about to hit his 90s pretty soon. And Zach asks him, like, hey, what's your typical day like? And the guy says, I like to go for a walk. I've lived here my entire life. There's not a whole lot to do, so I like to just walk around. And Zach's like, can we go for a walk with you? The dude's like, yeah, absolutely. And there's a funny part in the show, which obviously, if you're listening to this, you have either seen the show or you don't intend on ever watching the show. But there's a part in the show where they're going up the stairs, and the older guy asks Zach if he's okay going up the stairs. It's kind of a ribbing, right? Or maybe he meant it, I don't know. But it was pretty funny. Like, Zach's like, man, these are kind of difficult stairs. And don't this older man, well, for his walks to a bar and gets a glass of wine. So, like, people who have an idea of a traditional diet, their minds are being blown, right? For the majority of their life, they've been preached at for low carbs, high protein, avoid alcohol, all these different things. And the Sardinian people, who are amongst the longest living people ever, they eat very low protein, high carbs, and they're drinking wine. Like, it's crazy, right? So it's like it contradicts everything that you could ever possibly imagine, right? So And then they go on to say that a lot of these people have like manual labor jobs. A lot of them are shepherds. The shepherds walk anywhere from like 5 to 13 miles. I don't remember the exact mileage, but they walk like 5+ miles a day. So they're very active people. It's not like a lot of Sardinians are going to the gym. They already have plenty of activity just in their daily lives with the jobs that they have and the things that they do, right? So as opposed to a lot of people with sedentary jobs, office jobs, you're sitting in a chair all day, or maybe you're standing in place all day, you don't have a lot of activity for 6, 7, 8 hours of the day while you're working. So you've got to carve out a different time, a separate time, to go about doing exercise and physical activity. Sardinians are not in that boat. They already are so active, they don't need to have a separate exercise time. That's just how they are. And then they stress the fact that Sardinians have a low stress life. And then at the end of the show, Zac starts breaking down in his car and he says, I need to get out of Hollywood. It's super toxic. It's super stressful. This is not a way to live life. And people are probably like looking at Zac Efron like, what does this dude have to be stressed about? He's one of the most attractive people on the planet. He's super rich, super wealthy, super popular, super influential probably. And so what does he have to be stressed about? And I'm sure that Zac Efron lives a plenty stressful life, a life in the spotlight. Everybody's watching your every move, and you have an image to uphold. You have a certain standard that people hold you to that not many of us have to deal with. So, Zac talks about stress. So there's a lot of things to dissect there. I pretty much went through the show from beginning to end. And so trying to start from the beginning, I'm probably going to hop around a lot. The nutritional scientists. So the thing that they really stress is low protein, high carb, low protein, high carb, low protein, high carb, which is the exact opposite as a lot of people say. Now, here is the dilemma, and I've talked about this pretty extensively over the past 2 weeks in terms of science versus reality, and science being a little misleading sometimes, right? You watch a documentary, you watch anything, you watch this show, there's scientists, there's studies saying different things, right? So these scientists are saying a low protein diet could be the key to a long, healthy life. And there's been other studies out there that have said, eating higher amounts of protein has no adverse effects on your health, in the long run, right? So now you've got two different people telling you two different things. One of them is standing in front of Zac Efron, one of the most attractive people on the planet, and the other one is you're reading off a piece of paper that's already kind of hard to understand in the first place, right? So now you've got the decision to make, where am I going to go with this, right? A lot of people preach a high protein diet. This person's saying a low protein diet. They both have studies to back it up. Where do I fall in this conversation? That's something that you've got to kind of come up with yourself, right? The other thing to think about is there's a difference between health and fitness. They're very much so hand in hand a lot of times, but being healthy and being fitness are not always mutually exclusive, right? Somebody like a bodybuilder, right? Fitness is more so how you look. Health is more so how you function, how you feel, how long you last, right? How long your life is. So somebody who's very much so into fitness, let's say a bodybuilder, a high-level bodybuilder, somebody that's got to win, trying to win the Mr. Olympia title, they're going to do things to really stress their fitness, really stress the way that they look, that are not necessarily healthy for you, right? So steroids, right? Steroids are going to make you look the best you could possibly look when it comes to like posing on stage and having muscles and being super lean, but it's not healthy for you. So if somebody were to come up to me and is like, hey, how do I go about being healthy? You're not going to say do steroids. That doesn't make any sense. So there is a distinction to make between health and fitness. A lot of it goes hand in hand, but you can stray away from those two. So, when it comes to high protein, low protein, where do you go? It's kind of up to you, right? I've been preaching high protein for a while, right? When you want to manage your weight, when you want to lose weight or when you want to gain weight, you have to manipulate the calories that you eat. If you eat less calories than you need, you'll lose weight. If you eat more calories than you need, you'll gain weight. The quality of that weight gain or loss will be dictated upon how much protein you consume, right? So if you are in a calorie deficit where you're eating less calories than you need and you're losing weight, that's fantastic. But if you're doing that with a lot of sugary foods, a lot of high carb foods, and very low protein, you're going to lose muscle mass along with it, lean mass along with it. You're going to lose weight, but you're going to lose a lot of that muscle mass, that lean mass that you have on top of it, right? So if you have a higher protein diet, you can hold on to that muscle mass and really have a really good, crisp weight loss. But that being said, most people are probably good with, like, if you really want to emphasize muscle, you're good with like 0.75 to 1 grams per pound of body weight when it comes to protein. If muscle's not that important, you can get away with less. You probably don't need much more than 1 gram per pound of 1 gram of protein per pound of body weight that you are. So somebody who's 200 pounds technically should be consuming 200 grams of protein, but it's not completely necessary that they do that. However much emphasis you want to put on how you look will dictate how much protein you want to consume. So it's up in the air, right? Nobody knows really how safe protein is in the long run. Studies have said it's very safe for you. It's not going to have any adverse health effects. This other person saying Sardinians eat a low protein diet and they live one of the longest lives that we've ever seen on the planet, right? So you've got two opposing sides here. Whichever one you choose to go with is completely up to you and depends on the emphasis that you want to put on your life. But the other thing to think about when it comes to the Sardinian diet is the fact that they do talk about this potential genetic component. So if Sardinians have a gene that makes them predisposed to living longer, even if they had a really shitty diet, they might still live on average longer than other people, right? They might have a gene that predisposes them to that. Genetics plays such a huge part, right? Two people can be the same height and the same weight and look completely different, right? Batista, I wrote this in an article, Batista's like almost 300 pounds, almost 300 pounds, maybe even more than 300 pounds, I don't remember. He's the size of an NFL lineman, but they look very different, right? Batista's very muscular. An NFL lineman usually they have muscle mass, but it's not lean muscle mass. It's not, not very lean people. So obviously there's a big genetic difference there that shapes the way that you are, shapes the way that you look, shapes the way that you live. Whether or not you think Batista did that naturally, hint, hint, wink, wink, is completely up to you, but there's obviously genetic potential that comes into play. So is it the low protein diet that's making Sardinians live a long time, or is it this gene, right? Is it the low protein diet, or is it the fact that Sardinians are super active people, right? That older gentleman who walks to the bar, he walks all the time. He's walking all the time. The shepherds, they walk multiple miles a day. A lot of people in a Western civilization with sedentary jobs, they're very dormant for a long time, right? They sit for 6, 7, 8 hours of the day when they're working. And then when they're not working, they're sitting down watching TV. They're dormant again for several hours, right? They're not very active people. So is it the low protein diet? Is it the activity? Is it the low protein diet? Is it the fact that they have a lot less stress? They live a very low stress life, right? There's a lot of things that come into play here. So whether or not you want to believe some of the things that they do say in this episode, not saying that any of it's false, I'm not saying that any of it's true, but the one thing that I maybe am saying is that when you look at things, anything, but especially fitness, look at it with a critical lens. Make a decision. Don't take things just at face value. This person says, hey, a low protein diet makes Sardinians live a long time. That doesn't mean start implementing a low protein diet for you. Figure out if that's what you want to do. Try it for a while. See if you like it. Make your own decisions, right? And I just watched Hamilton for the first time on Disney Plus, and I'm not going to spoil it, so don't worry. No spoilers here, but one of the biggest criticisms that Alexander Hamilton has of Aaron Burr is the fact that Aaron Burr doesn't really have any morals, right? He's very much so in the middle of a lot of arguments. What do you stand for, Burr? He doesn't swing either way, right? He doesn't have any strong beliefs on anything. Aaron Burr is very much so in the middle kind of guy, and he gets a lot of flack for that from Alexander Hamilton, if you've seen Hamilton, the play, of course. And I think if Burr was alive now and he was in the fitness industry, he would do very, very well, because a lot of the answers, a lot of the truth in the fitness industry lies in the middle. There's a lot of people that want to push extremes, right? Keto's an extreme, vegan is an extreme. If those things work for you, that's fantastic. But a lot of people, most people, a big majority of the people are going to fall somewhere in the middle, and that's really where they're going to make the bulk of their progress. So when it comes to fitness, maybe it's time to take a page out of Aaron Burr's philosophy and kind of, look at things with a critical eye. Don't take them at face value, and be somewhere in the middle. And hopefully, that starts unlocking a lot of these doors for you that you had trouble opening before. So that wraps up that part of the show. Debunking, Down to Earth with Zac Efron. Q&A. Haven't done one in 2 weeks, so I'm going to do it here. Made to Excel Fitness, University of Hard Knocks of Common Sense. We'll take a break. But Q&A, we've got 2 questions. One, this is a question I abbreviated because the actual full length question was funny and it was kind of a jumbled mess. But pretty much the gist of it was, should I be looking at myself in a mirror when I'm working out? And he goes on saying, like, looking at doing bicep curls, shoulder things to see my placement. And that's absolutely a fantastic idea. Obviously, when you're in the gym and you're staring at yourself in the mirror, it looks super douchey, and I'm sure a lot of people do it with douchey intentions. They would just want to see themselves, see how they look at their muscles rippling in the glistening light, bouncing off the sweat. They want to see the veins popping out of their arms. But a visual feedback tool like a mirror can really help you with your form, and even something like a video. I think I've said this before. Videoing yourself in a gym is very uncomfortable, but if you have a form concern, right? You think you may be doing something incorrectly. Taking a video is going to be so much more helpful than maybe how you think you are without looking at it, right? I could think that I'm shooting a basketball with perfect form, but until I look at a video, I'm like, holy shit, it's terrible. So having a visual feedback can very much so drastically improve a lot of people's form with different exercises and things of that nature. So if you want to have instant visual feedback by looking at a mirror and making adjustments in that moment, or you want to have a video where you can see, you can look back at it and say, all right, this I can fix, this I can be better at, and fix it from there. Those are absolutely great ideas. And a very secret weapon that you can be using in the gym to elevate yourself even more. And last question, are there any supplements that are worth taking? And this is something that a lot of fitness influencers say, and it's true, but it's corny. Supplements, say it in the words, it's a supplementation, you don't need it, right? So it's a very corny saying, but it makes sense, right? It's a supplement. You don't need any supplements. If you choose to take supplements, that's completely up to you. It's completely optional if you want to go that route. If you're a person who does not consume enough protein, talking about protein in this episode, then you can take a protein supplement, right? If you feel as if you need 100 grams of protein a day for whatever your goal is, and you're only eating 50, and you can't force yourself to eat another 50 grams of protein of, chicken, beef, turkey, whatever, steak, right? Or maybe you're a vegan and you're getting protein from different sources and you're having trouble getting protein from these sources. You can absolutely take a protein powder. Make sure you get a good one, right? If you want to take creatine, if you want to have more, one more rep in the tank when you go to the gym, you want to make that progress, you can absolutely take creatine. Creatine is highly studied, and it's, the positive effects are well documented, but at the end of the day, it's going to get you maybe one more rep of an exercise. Is that one more rep worth it for you to spend $30 on a bottle of creatine? That's completely up to you. For some people, it's going to be worth it. For most people, probably not. If your doctor says you're deficient in a vitamin, if you can get that vitamin in a natural way, in a food source, absolutely do that. But if you just can't do it, get a vitamin, right? There are things that you will help you in your journey. None of it is completely necessary, but that's up to you to figure out. That's up to you and your coach to figure out, you and your nutritionist, your registered dietitian to figure out. So no supplements are absolutely necessary to take, but you can take supplements if they help you in your specific scenario. Last but not least for the show, I'm doing a new thing called the weekly follow-up. So when I first started this podcast, I did not like listening to it back because I don't like to hear the sound of my own voice. But as I start to find my stride as a podcaster, I am listening back and I'm realizing that there are things that I intended to say in the week's prior podcast that I forget about, right? So in the weekly follow-up, that is my opportunity to kind of fill in the holes that I left in last week's podcast. So obviously, this weekly follow-up is about last week's podcast, episode 20, Can You Get Shredded in 2 Weeks? And the premise of the entire show is about a time frame for your goals, right? And the overarching kind of idea that I wanted to put out there was the fact that once you become comfortable with the fact that fitness is something that you do for the entirety of your life, a timeline doesn't seem as important, right? It's not like you're going to reach your goal and you can stop working out, you can stop eating good, and you're going to always keep that goal, right? Of course, that's not how that works. You're going to have to keep working at it. So once you come to grips with the fact that this is something you're going to do for the rest of your life, the timeline doesn't necessarily matter anymore. But the one thing that I did forget to mention is the fact that you can still have goals that have timelines, right? I talked about the kid who does strongman. But it doesn't have to be necessarily anything like that. Maybe you have a wedding coming up, right? And you want to lose X amount of pounds in X amount of weeks for the wedding. But the other thing that I forgot to mention when it comes to timeline is when you do have a timeline and you do have a time frame, coming up with a time frame that is realistic, right? So myself, personally, the first few episodes of this podcast were about bored eating, and I was just talking about what I knew in that moment, because when quarantine started, I was bored eating like a motherfucker, right? There's snacks everywhere. I was in the house, so I was just eating a lot, right? And my ice cream consumption has gone through the roof. So, of course, in the past few months, I've gained weight. So, since March 16th, it's been 20 weeks from that point, I've gained 15 pounds, right? Which is a lot. 15 pounds is a lot. But when you start to break it down, I've gained 15 pounds in 20 weeks. So I really gained less than a pound per week. So when I want to reverse that and when I want to lose that weight now, you got to think about, I gained 15 pounds in 20 weeks. So that was less than 1 pound gain per week. Your reverse of that should be kind of similar, right? Not saying that you have to wait 20 weeks to lose 15 pounds. You don't have to do it that slow, I guess. You can definitely do it faster, but it's not like you gain 15 pounds in 20 weeks, so you should expect to lose that 15 pounds in 3 weeks. You shouldn't expect to lose that 15 pounds in 5 weeks. At the very least, it's going to take you probably 10 weeks, and that's very, very fast. It really should take you more like 15 weeks. Somewhere similar to how long it took you to gain should be how long it takes you to lose, right? It doesn't have to be an even 1-1 split, but having realistic time frames is really going to help you out with, especially the psychology part of it, right? A lot of people are upset with their lack of progress, and it's not the lack of progress, it's the lack of progress in the time frame that you intended to make the progress. So if you're expecting to lose 15 pounds in 2 weeks, it ain't going to happen. It's probably going to take more like 10, 15, 20 weeks. So be realistic with your time frames, and you'll be so much happier for it. So that wraps up today's show. If you enjoyed today's show, hit the subscribe button, leave me a review, leave me a comment, share the show with a friend who think I'd be funny. Not many people, but follow me on Instagram, MTFit. Follow me on Facebook. If you're watching this on YouTube, hit the subscribe button here too, and watch one of these 2 videos that pops up. I think you'll enjoy them if you haven't seen them already. But knowing you guys, you've probably seen them all. That's it for today. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.
What's up, Mark? How you doing, man? Hunter Henry, LA Charger tight end. Best big time shout out to your fitness podcast, the Made to Excel fitness podcast. So super cool, man. Got a lot going on. Bolt Ganger, don't bang.